Thanks to everyone who's joined so far. And I think just as an introduction from my side, I'm Kathy. I'm based in Johannesburg, South Africa. I'm a senior talent partner with Instant Impact. And very happy to be joined today by Eva and Alex. And we're really talking about the world of remote working and really how we're going to be navigating our way through the world of work. And things have changed and strategies need to change. Hiring strategies need to change. I'm very lucky that I've joined a business that is really embracing remote global working. And really, I think it comes with lots of benefits, lots of opportunities, but equally, I think it comes with its own challenges. And I think we've all experienced some of those challenges and hiccups along the way. I'd really like to introduce everyone to the panel. So we've got Alex from Omnipresent. My understanding is, Alex, you're an account executive. And obviously, Omnipresent is a company that I know very well, being part of the remote world. And Alex, you support the clients in kind of employing internationally and simplifying that process and making it more cost effective and also legally compliant, which is obviously one of the challenges that many companies would experience. So welcome, Alex. It's really nice to have you. And Eva. So Eva joined Passion recently as head of HR based in Cologne, as you've just said, in Germany. And obviously looking at sort of shaping the HR strategy and driving the success, and development of employees in a sort of remote working environment. And I think what's rung true for me about Passion is that it's really a truly international and fully remote business, which is really interesting. And I think, with that in mind, I'd love to sort of kick off with a question, and I'm going to start with you, Eva, and that really is, why do you think companies should hire remotely? And maybe you can just talk about how it's worked for Passion and how you see things changing and developing going forward.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me, Kathy. Really great to be here. Well, that's exactly the thing, right? Why should companies hire remotely? First of all, geographical limits. Because when you try to find talent and you are limited to a certain location, you obviously don't have access to a percentage of the talent pool that you have access to when you hire globally. And as a company at Passion, we don't want to hire people that are in the right location. We want to hire the best people, the best fit for our organization, the best cultural fit, the best skills. And it's so unlikely to find these people at exactly the place where you decided to have a company location, right? So that's the biggest reason for us. No matter where people are located, we want to hire the best people. And that's why we hire globally. And that's why we work remotely. And then in addition to that, no commuting for our team members whatsoever. So not wasting time in the train or on the highway. It's also very environmental friendly because that doesn't happen. And it's also great, and that might be more of a personal reason for me to join a company that works remotely and is very international. I love to work with so many different people in so many different locations. It's such a great addition to my professional and also personal life to get to know so many different nationalities. Yeah.
Yeah, and I love what you say, because I'm finding it also very refreshing working with so many different cultures of people from different backgrounds. It just breeds quite a positive culture in my view. Alex, just on the back of what Eva's spoken about, I mean, how do you support businesses in terms of enabling that remote work? Because it's one thing to think about it, but it's another to actually be able to do it successfully and within legal limits. So maybe you can just talk to us a little bit about what you see as the benefits and how you help companies do that.
Yeah, absolutely. So just as a kickoff, what Omnipresent primarily does is offer a service called the Employer of Record service, which basically means we help companies hire in countries where they don't have a legal entity. And why is that important? Some people might be completely aware of this already, but you can't hire somebody on a full-time employment contract if you haven't created a legal entity there. So Omnipresent is able to do this on your behalf. And we do this in about 158 countries at the moment. So wow. Pretty expansively. And just kind of touching on what Eva said there, I think, allowing companies to do what we sometimes call like talent-based hiring. So hiring where in the world there's talent rather than just in like being restricted to a location where you have your legal entity is obviously a huge kind of positive, but also actually from a retention perspective, remote hiring is also really important. So, Eva might have an amazing colleague who works in Germany at the moment, who then decides, they want to go, maybe when their partner is from Italy and they want to go and move to Italy. Now, I'm sure everyone is very aware of the cost of kind of rehiring and upskilling an individual. So actually sometimes to be able to retain an individual who already brings a lot of value to a company, allowing them the flexibility to go and work in another country is hugely beneficial for a business.
Absolutely. And when companies come to you for assistance, Alex, what is generally the biggest challenge they face when kind of, moving into more of a remote sort of working structure or environment?
Yeah, I think it's just trying to get their head around all the information that you need to consider when taking on or setting an individual up in a new country. So whether that be like in local employer taxes in that country, the benefits offering, as you can imagine, like benefits vary hugely, and not just between, somewhere like the US and Italy, but within Europe itself, like the benefits offered from a statutory level and also just from a kind of local expected level are so vastly different that kind of navigating those things by themselves can be really complex. So that's something that we definitely kind of help with at Omnipresent.
Perfect. I meant to mention at the beginning, sorry, if anyone has got questions, please feel free to put them in the quick Q&A box. I'll keep my eye on it. I forgot to mention that. Eva, I'd like to just, obviously apart from the benefit side, which is hugely important, and the legislative side, maybe you can just talk to us a little bit about what the biggest challenges you've faced with running a remote business, onboarding people, productivity. I'd love to hear how that's been sort of managed and, so that they don't become big problems, because they can, I suppose, if they aren't managed correctly.
Yeah, definitely. Well, first of all, I mean, obviously, hiring remotely, as Alex just said, one of the biggest challenges is getting it right in terms of the legal framework. So that's, I think, the first step. And also, when it comes to challenges, one of the challenges is actually time zones for us as well. So that's definitely something where you have to come up with a good concept to make sure that the people that need to work together also have certain time slots where they are able to actually interact with each other, which would obviously be an issue if someone has to work with someone on a daily basis that is based in the US and they are based in China, right? So that is definitely one of the challenges. I would say it's fairly easy to manage because you can, for example, as a company, you can decide that you want to hire certain teams in a certain time zone frame to make sure that there is some overlap. So
on specific projects potentially to make sure that people are in similar time zones.
Exactly. So that's definitely one of the challenges that we're also facing and that you have to think through when you hire globally. Another challenge I would say is when you look at culture and creating a remote culture, I think you have to go the extra mile. Not saying that you don't have to do that when you're located in an office. I think a lot of companies might think that just because you're located in the same office, a great culture just, magically appears, which is unfortunately not the case. But when it comes to remote teams, there is just some extra effort needed to make sure that you really connect with the people on a personal level, and that the people and your team feels part of your organization, which is ultimately a great indicator for retention, right? Because for remote workers and remote team members, it's unfortunately, like just based on research, more likely to not feel that much part of a company as people that go to an office on a day-to-day basis, because they just have that personal connection. So there's some extra effort you have to invest as a company to make sure that all of your team members really feel connected to the other teams and to the company, to be able to, you know, foster a great culture and make sure that people want to stay, and it's not too easy for them to just leave for another remote job for another company.
And I guess not just from an HR perspective, but managing the managers to help and support them in, you know, creating inclusive teams within their environments. Eva, just another quick one. So I mean, you know, I think my many years in recruitment, what this has done, remote work, has made it a far more competitive environment. So we're no longer competing with companies in a certain area. We're now competing with companies and with people globally, everywhere across the world. You know, I'm sure you've experienced this, and probably you as well, Alex, in your hiring efforts for Omnipresent. But I'd like to understand, you know, what gives you the competitive edge, and how do you feel you might do things differently to make working for passion more attractive than a lot of other companies are going the route of fully remote?
I think at some point, going remote is not going to be a real benefit anymore. It's going to be a necessity somehow, right? So when you hire people that can work from anywhere, at some point, I think in the next couple of years as a company, you won't have a choice. You have to offer it as a remote position, and you hire globally to get good people for your team. So as a company at Passion, this is the base of how we work. And this is the framework of what we do and how we hire people. But then to be attractive as an employer, you have to go way beyond just offering remote work, I think. It's about remote work is something that everyone can offer if they want to. But then how you frame it and how you make sure that people actually get the support they need, although they are working remotely, they get the personal connection, they have fun at work and not just sit in front of their computer and do their day-to-day job. It's what the company provides to create, almost like a tribe-like unit, a company where you really feel part of. And the remote work is just, it's just a matter of fact. People are located all over the world and they work remotely, but what comes on top of that is what actually creates an attractive employer, I think. And that's something that we try to do very well at Passion, I would say, with half yearly offsites, events in different locations. We have an upcoming event end of April in Croatia with the team meeting in person, just bonding and having a great experience together. These are the things that really foster the culture and make it attractive to join and also to stay.
Has Passion ever considered opening offices?
We had an office, actually.
Okay.
So yeah, it's quite a while ago, but we had an office in Berlin. I think we actually still have it and use it as some kind of, shared office space. If someone wants, Wi-Fi doesn't work and they live in Berlin, they could, for example, go to the Passion office. But to be honest, we gave up the concept of in-office work a while ago. And from what I know, we never regretted it. So even this week, our CEO mentioned in a call that since we went remote, our culture and team bond actually got better compared to how it was when there was an office, because we never had everyone in the office. Some people were still located somewhere else, and that kind of created a disconnect. So for us, it was really an improvement to go from having an office to fully remote for everyone, because now we can concentrate on our remote culture. So no way to go back for us.
Awesome. No, that's good to hear. And, you know, I think companies, and really this question I'm going to aim at you, Alex. You know, I think there are companies, and particularly I know of some companies in South Africa and lots globally that are resisting the sort of remote work model. So you obviously have companies coming to you, Alex, you know, to implement this. And I guess I'd love to know what your thoughts are around, you know, are companies at risk if they don't do something about remote work? And what do you think those risks are? And I'd also like to understand timelines, you know, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think the risk thing is really interesting because it really depends on your kind of how your company are thinking about expanding. You know, if you are a company that are only interested in building a kind of centralized base of individuals in one place, and let's face it, for some companies that might be completely necessary. Maybe if you're working in somewhere like a lab, for example, having people in other countries is just not going to be something that is going to work for your company. But if you are, I think, thinking about how you can increase diversity within your company, how you can increase kind of the range of candidates you get, you are potentially at risk if you are just looking in a kind of localized area. And I think sometimes companies come to us, and I think there can be a bit of confusion between the idea of being remote first and saying that employees can work from anywhere, because those two terms are slightly different, right? Because if we think about remote first as a term, that's kind of, and I think Eva touched on this as well, talking about having a globally distributed team. Now that is actually a little bit different from saying work from anywhere, which is potentially saying to your employees, you know, we've set you up in our company in the UK, but if you want to relocate to Canada, we're happy to support that. So, you know, when companies are coming into this, they just need to think really carefully about what they want their remote work model to look like. And I think it's going to look a little bit different for every company.
I was actually going to ask that question around work from anywhere, as opposed to remote working, as you say. So, you know, do you think companies should consider it? I mean, how much more complex is it than simply remote?
Yeah, so it really depends on the country the individual is in. And what I would say about work from anywhere is most countries allow employees or workers to go and work in another country for a period of time. It varies, but it's usually kind of less than 6 months without you having to kind of give them a new employment contract, without having to pay local taxes in that country that they're in. However, if they want to go and move permanently to another country, that's where you need to consider, right, okay, so are we willing to give this employee a new employment contract? And then as well as that, I guess there's other things that you might want to consider as a company, like if we had an employee moving from, let's say, the UK to Mexico, where the cost of living is potentially a lot lower, are we then going to adjust their salary? And that would be something that you'd want to think about beforehand, so that your employees were aware of the policies that were in place, so that if they did want to move, they would know, okay, well, I might have to consider that I would have a salary reduction because in this country, you know, there's a lower cost of living and therefore my company would reduce my salary as a result of that. So I think there's just a few things that companies definitely want to kind of think through before they decide if they want to be kind of work from anywhere or remote first.
Okay, no, that makes sense. And, you know, I think also to your point, you know, Mexico versus the UK, it's not always a copy and paste, right? Because each company, or each country, should I say, has different costs of living, different benefits, different culture, all of that sort of thing. And, you know, I suppose so many things need to be taken into account. So, I mean, remote working is not brand new. It's been done, and but just not, I guess, at the level that we're used to, and I guess not as forced as it was a little over 2 years ago. So maybe Eva, I can direct this question at you to begin with. But do you think that the pandemic and sort of the increase to remote working has had a positive impact on hiring, sort of by forcing companies to sort of rethink how they hire?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Definitely. I've heard, so in my network, I've, have quite a lot of other people in HR, leaders in HR, and just friends working in companies that went remote as well. And I think at least for the majority of companies that I heard from, there was a great learning happening. It was like, oh, wow, we've been working remotely for 1.5 years now, and, nothing happened. We just continued. We, made our revenue, people worked. They were not just, they haven't been paid for watching Netflix all day and not doing anything. We don't actually have to have them sit at their desk in the office or, need to monitor them all day to get results. And I think that was great. I think in a lot of situations, we're still too focused on time, whereas for a lot of roles that we have in companies, it's just not related anymore. Alex, the example for for a lab, or for example for a production line, that's completely different, right? Because you can directly link time to output, which makes a lot of sense. So 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week makes a lot of sense. For a lot of different other roles, it just doesn't make sense anymore. And I think that's one of the learnings that some companies had. And I've heard about a lot of companies that at least implemented a hybrid model after the pandemic now, and are really, happy about that. Or at least, I know the employees are really happy about it.
I know I, for one, I've found that I'm far more productive. And yes, you probably work longer hours, but you're also not spending time in traffic and, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm definitely an advocate for remote working, but I agree that hybrid is also, some people do prefer the option of actually going
Absolutely.
and sitting in an office,
And I know we had a couple of interviews actually where people are just not into fully remote work, which is perfectly fine, right? It might not be the right model for every person. It might not be the right model for every company, to your point, Alex. It's just, you have to find the right ratio for yourself, and then the right fit when it comes to company and candidate fit, right? So
I think there's definitely something to be said for being in the room with people. But I think, to your point, Eva, much like Instant Impact, where I am, having functions, we're going to be having one, I think, towards the end of July, where we can actually meet everybody. And I think that almost is, for me personally, sufficient to kind of meet the team, spend some time with them, but then go back and continue with my job. Alex, what do you think the benefits are for employers to hire remotely? Because we've spoken quite a bit about the employees and yes, the companies and possibly production, but what sort of positive changes have you seen your clients go through as employers of remote staff, and maybe moving into a remote from an office-based environment, which I'm sure you would have seen quite a bit of?
I think it's interesting because, as you kind of said in the question, we've talked a lot about the benefits to employees, but really the benefits to employees as a result are benefits to the employers. Having a kind of happier, more flexible workforce is only going to be something that's going to be able to help companies. You want your employees to feel kind of valued, but within that, like, they can complete their tasks within their own time. You know, we don't need to run on this 9 to 5 anymore. And I think what lots of kind of studies have been able to show is that people having this flexibility at work makes them much more productive, makes their output much better. So of course, that is a huge benefit to employers. Ultimately, you know, what I guess all you really want is a kind of happy and productive workforce. But I think beyond that, you know, that something that always comes across to me that perhaps employers or companies aren't thinking about as much when they first are thinking about this talent-based hiring is how much they increase their diversity. So just an example of this is I've been working quite closely with a UK company who are really struggling to hire software engineers, which I think is probably a problem. Well, it is a problem across the world based on the conversations I'm having. Yeah, because they are. Look, there's a talent shortage, right? Yeah. And they've just recently hired 3 individuals in Kenya. Because the kind of software they're building, they need a very specific type of, you know, software engineer. And these engineers, they've just said, like, are absolutely fantastic. Like, but above and beyond that, they never thought they'd be kind of diversifying their workforce like this. You know, how great to bring 3 members of their team that can bring like a different culture, a different perspective. And I think it's easy to underestimate that and how much it can bring to a company. And it's made them really excited about kind of thinking about, well, actually, where else have we not thought about hiring? So yeah, I think that's a huge, the diversity piece can't be underestimated.
I agree with you, Alex. And I guess coming from an African business and having to have stepped out of my South African bubble, I guess you could say it's been so refreshing for me to be talking to people, colleagues from different continents every single day. And it does keep it interesting for staff members as well, that you're not all from the same area, kind of same backgrounds, you know, same experiences. It does definitely create you know, we like to learn about each other more because we're all so different. And I think for me, maybe being in recruitment and being so passionate about people, that's one benefit for me. But the diversity is a big thing, I think. I mean, for either of you, or in fact both of you, I'd love for you to both share like your top, say, 2 or 3 tips for managers now managing remotely. And there's a lot of talk around, you know, are there techniques and tools and platforms and all these different things that one can use to manage effectively. But I'd love to kind of get your input on your top 2 or 3. And Alex, maybe we can just start with you.
Yeah, so top input for, I guess, like top tips for managers when they're thinking about hiring or potentially just managing a remote team. So I think the first thing here is going to be to understand, like, how is your team going to be working together? You know, are you going to be meeting on a regular basis? Or are you going to be a team that kind of just communicates via a platform like Slack? You know, what's the best way if you need to get in touch with somebody quickly? You know, would they prefer you do that via like email or phone? Because you don't have that kind of the ability just to turn to the person next to you or over the office and say, can you help out with that? How you're going to communicate in these situations if there's an emergency, you know, I think you really need to define your working practices ahead of time, and make sure that the whole team have come together on that, because I think that makes for a much less kind of stressful workplace. And I think that kind of collaboration and thinking about those points ahead of time are really helpful when the team aren't just physically together. And it's almost like that if there's a, you know, suddenly if something's on fire, what do I do? You know, if someone's stated really clearly they don't want to be called on the phone, well, how do I make sure I can contact them really quickly and they'll be checking whatever it is, whether it be Slack or email. So yeah, I think defining kind of practices ahead of time is a really kind of important place to start. Eva, I don't know if you want to say something and then I'll go back with another point if we can take it in turns.
Yeah, sure. Good idea. I would say my first tip is seeing your team members as their whole selves. Because I think in working remotely, it's sometimes easy to kind of disconnect from the whole person that you work with. And we encourage our managers, especially, and leaders, to make sure that they really encourage their teams to bring their whole selves to work, even if it's remote work, and or especially because it's remote work, because we're much closer to the personal environment, right? Because we work remotely, and a lot of our team members work from home, actually. Although they could work from shared office spaces as well, but a lot of them do work from home. And we might see their kids or cats or dogs or whomever running around at home. And, it's okay. We ask them, did you go for a run in the morning? Or it's just important to keep that personal connection as a leader with your remote team. And that would be my first tip. Yeah.
I love that, Eva, and it's such a good point. We were chatting about it yesterday in the team around, if you're in the office with people every day, you'll notice if somebody's down, but because you see them for half an hour in a quick, morning stand-up, it's quite easy to hide your emotions, behind a screen. So it is important, I suppose, to check in with people, not just how's work going, but how are you doing? And I think that's becoming more and more important, and making people feel like they can do that, even if they've never met the person, So I actually love that. And I think it is so important. Alex, did you have another point to make?
Yeah, actually, more just kind of touching on what Eva said there. I think it's really interesting just thinking back to my previous experience. So in my last job, we were based like office based, and I don't think I ever had a manager say to me in that role, like, how are you? Like, how are you feeling about this? Which might not relate to anything within work, but just my personal life. Or are you feeling happy in the role? Is there anything I could do here to kind of make you more productive, for example? Strangely, even though I was in offices with managers every day, I don't think we ever had those conversations. However, now I know this is something that my manager would kind of catch up with me regularly about. And I think part of that is because exactly what you mentioned, there isn't that ability to just look over and think, oh, well, she looks like she seems quite happy in herself, so probably don't need to touch on anything. And I think it's really important, something that I've only learned quite recently, is one of the reasons people find Zoom very, very tiring sometimes is because it's much harder for us to read body language and signals on a camera on Zoom. So we have to work much harder to not only portray how we're feeling, but also understand the people that we're talking to and understand how they're feeling. And with that, I think, just making sure that you take the time to, as Eva says, like, understand somebody's whole self is a really important part of building culture and helping employees feel happy in their kind of remote work environment.
Absolutely. And, Alex, I was also in a sort of fully office-based role before. And I think now that we've sort of moved to a more remote environment, to me, there isn't really much work-life balance anymore, because it's not you walking out your front door, going to the office, coming home. There's a blend between the two, right? And, you might finish a little bit early, go and do kids stuff or gym, or, go for a meal, and then log on a bit later, So that's kind of how things have changed. I think with that, particularly for those, me being one of them, you're working from home, but you're living at the office at the same time. So it really is about looking after your staff's well-being as a whole. So I think that's so important.
And not assuming as well that just because everyone's working from home, that's like an ideal place to be working from. So again, like I'm probably a good example of this. So I live in a flat share, so I don't have an office. I live like I can show you, I'm currently sitting here in my kitchen. So if I'm doing something like this webinar, I have to say to my two flatmates who are also here at home, like, can you not come into the kitchen and make any lunch at this time? Because I'm speaking to quite a few people. But that's really challenging for me, actually, sometimes. And actually, one of the ways that Omnipresent have been super flexible is by giving me remote workspace. And that's really important for me, because otherwise I'd probably really struggle to do my role if I had to be at home all the time. So yeah, not just assuming that because people are at home that their kind of setup is ideal, and making sure that they have everything in place to make sure that they can be successful.
That's also a really good point, actually, Alex. We offer shared offices at Passion, like a budget for renting a desk or something. I think a lot of companies do that, but you know, talking about companies that are thinking about going remote, I think that's something that you should factor in, because it's not ideal for everyone. We just moved, so now I do have an office, but before I didn't. So, and I know the struggles, right? So it is really something that you know, you just have to think through, and also not just assume that everyone, you know, we're offering remote work, so it's on them. They have to figure it out. It should work. It's also something that is our responsibility as an employer to, just like in the office, make sure that everyone working wherever they work have an environment where they can strive, right? That's really important.
I think that's going to determine the success, right? I mean, I know for me, I do have an office at home, but it can get quite boring being in the same place every single day. So I do sometimes pop out to a coffee shop and just work there if I don't have calls, which also just kind of, you know, gets you out of that environment, which sometimes we need as human beings, just a bit of a change. Alex, a question's come through on the chat. What's the most common hiring misconceptions or mistakes that you've come across when it comes to remote?
Yeah, probably sometimes I get on calls with people and they say like, right, so we've set up this individual, they're in Spain, we're a UK-based company, and we're paying them on our UK payroll. So I think that probably the biggest misconception is people not actually understanding that you can't just pay somebody who's working full-time in another country through your payroll in that country. And the reason for that is because of the potential tax risk. If somebody is living full-time in a country, you need to be paying local employer taxes in that country. And probably the second part of that, which is probably also the biggest misconception, is how widely employer taxes vary from country to country. So just to give you like a really quick example, if you had, so let's take a round number, let's say you had somebody on 100,000 euros working in France, for example, employer taxes there are up to about 50%. So you're looking at an additional 50,000 euros on top of that employee's salary of 100,000 euros. Now, somewhere like South Africa, for example, employer taxes are much, much lower. You're looking at kind of between 2 to 4%. So obviously your employer taxes there are going to be anything between sort of 2,000 to 4,000 euros. So, you know, that's a huge difference when you think about your kind of costs for that employee. Those things differ massively. And it's not always the countries that you think that are going to be kind of low cost that are. So some of the places that are quite kind of have really high employer costs that people don't always know, Mexico, high employer costs, Brazil, really high employer costs. Yeah, so it's something that companies definitely are not always aware of. And then when they sometimes realize that they're like, oh, this is actually going to change everything for us quite a lot. So I
was actually going to ask you, which countries do you find you know, companies are most likely, might be from a cost perspective or culture perspective, I don't know, there must be lots of reasons, skills, etc., where people are trying to start hiring remote team members. Are there any particular regions in the world?
Yeah, so it's interesting. It kind of depends on the types of roles that you're looking to hire, I guess. And going back to the software engineering roles, because those seem to be particularly ones that people really struggle to hire. We definitely see, so like Africa, so across Africa is becoming increasingly popular because there's a few hubs like Kenya that I mentioned, for example, that have like a large number of software engineers. Eastern Europe, particularly popular for hiring software engineers. South Africa, another one. Places as well like Spain, Portugal, France, Germany, also popular places to hire those kinds of roles. Although what people probably don't maybe always consider with those ones I just mentioned there are well, Eva, you'll be very aware of this, Germany being one of these countries, but kind of employer regulations in these countries are a lot more complex than somewhere like the US or the UK. So sometimes when we give companies employment contracts for somewhere like France, for example, they can't believe how much more kind of complex they are compared to maybe one. Yeah. So that's definitely something that people,
things like maternity benefits. I mean, 100%. I think it's in Germany that maternity benefits are really good, if I'm not mistaken. Whereas, you know, legally in, you know, it could be 4 months in other countries, where in some countries it's up to 18 months. That's, you know,
and in the US, for example, in a lot of states, there's just, you know, nothing, no paid.
Exactly. So it's all these things, I guess, that we need to consider. I'm very mindful of time. We're 45 minutes almost in. So just in closing, Eva, any final comments from you in terms of why go remote and the benefits thereof?
Oh my God! Well, I could repeat everything I've said. I think we said a lot of things that are just a really good example for why companies should go remote. But I'm just going to go with the one or the two that are most important for us as a company, which is they're kind of going together, because on one hand, going remote, we have the opportunity to find exactly the right people for us, no matter where they are located. And finding the right people doesn't only mean that they have the right skills, it also means that they are a cultural fit, which is getting more and more and more important. And them being a cultural fit leads to the culture that we have, right? And being remote is a huge part of the culture that we have. And these are the two things I would say that's why companies should go remote. Yeah.
And that talks to competitive edge and competitive advantage in my view. Alex, any final comments from your side?
Yeah, I mean, I think Eva's just kind of summed it up perfectly, but I guess the three top things that I've put there are increasing diversity, which I know we've talked about a lot, accessing that wider range of talent, not limiting yourself to your localized area or where you have an entity, and ultimately just having a potentially happier workforce. I think, you know, we don't all live to work, so trying to make it as enjoyable as you can for your employees is only going to be beneficial to everybody overall. And I think with mental health in the workplace being such a kind of key focus for so many companies going forward, this could play like a sort of huge part to that. So yeah.
Thank you. I mean, I know I, for one, like I said, I'm a huge advocate of remote working, and I know my 4 dogs agree, because I don't know what they would do if I had to leave them at home alone all day, every day. But ladies, I just want to say thank you so much. It's been fabulous talking to you. Really, really enjoyed it. And we will be sending around the recording as well as some feedback forms in the next 12 hours or so, if everyone wouldn't mind completing them. And Eva, Alex, thank you again. And I hope to speak to you again in future.
Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Enjoy your days. Bye.
Bye. Bye.